Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Tuesday, the 1st of August. I'm Aidan Macdonald and today I'm joined by Ryan McGinlay. Ryan, how are you, mate?
Doing good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, all good, all good. Obviously, plenty to discuss. We've got James Forrest testimonial, which takes place tonight, which we'll be touching on, and you and I will also be providing live coverage from that game tonight. We've also got your predictions, which went live on the website this morning, and it's available in the description of this podcast and video that we'll kind of be discussing. So, yeah, no, I'm looking forward to getting into it. But before we do that, guys, for anybody that's interested, the ticker tape down below has the information of our latest subscription offer. It's £12 for a year's access to the website. That's obviously ad-light access to all the sort of premium content that we've got on there. That includes scouting reports, data analysis, big interviews, features, match reaction, and we really appreciate anybody that's able to subscribe, guys. That allows us to do videos like this Monday to Friday for the morning briefing. Live video reaction after games at the weekend and midweek, which we're obviously looking forward to bringing you across this season. So get yourself involved, guys, if you haven't already. The link's in the description and also in the ticker tape down below. It's www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Now, Ryan, just to get into a couple of things, obviously, firstly, tonight is James Forrest's testimonial, playing Athletic Club at Parkhead. It's also Brendan Rodgers' first game back and his second spell. I know we did discuss it yesterday, but I guess briefly, firstly, are you looking forward to the game? And secondly, do you think that will be kind of a good indicator of what position the team are in ahead of the game on Saturday?
Yeah, it's a good game to sort of finish off pre-season with ahead of the game on Saturday. I know that Athletic Club finished 8th in La Liga last season, so they're a bit of a decent outfit. They've never been relegated from La Liga before, so they're pretty much stalwarts when it comes to La Liga. They're managed by Ernesto Valverde, who used to manage Barcelona, so he comes from pretty good stock as well. Yeah, it should be a good test for Celtic. Obviously, it's a big night for James Forrest with regard to his testimonial. Hopefully it's a good turnout for him. It's looking like it will be. So yeah, it's. I think it covers a lot of bases. It'll be a good test, a good team we're playing against, and a good night for James Forrest as well, and plenty of money getting raised for charity, which is always a good thing too. Yeah, it sounds like it should be a good night ahead. I'm looking forward to watching the game, seeing how far along Celtic are in their preparations. Thought they looked quite good against Wolves on Saturday, so I'm expecting another step up in their performance. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how they do.
I think it will be interesting. The sort of last pre-season game always has a bit more kind of an added edge, given that players are fighting for positions ahead of the game against Ross County at the weekend, and also, as we mentioned, the fact that it's Brendan Rodgers' first game back at Parkhead. It'll be maybe interesting to see what sort of reception he gets. Now, we also know he was speaking yesterday and he was saying there's no apprehension there. He's not, worried about coming back. He understands not all the fans are going to be on side immediately, but he kind of sees it as his goal to sort of win everybody over come sort of the end of his spell, which was interesting. It shows you he's obviously confident. He obviously touched on a few things yesterday. We had the sort of full Q&As up on the website along with John Kennedy as well, and he discussed how there won't be a sort of 15 to 20 million pound player coming in, Ryan, in between now and the end of the transfer window. So I suppose we can kind of look at that a couple of ways in that obviously fans might have wanted a sort of marquee sign, if you want to use that word. I know it's kind of a word that gets bandied about a lot as to sort of prop up the whole transfer window, but just because there's not a 15 to 20 million player, I suppose that doesn't mean there can't be a 10 million pound player if you want to look at it from a positive angle.
That's very true, and you want Celtic to spend within their means as well. You don't want them getting into any financial difficulties due to signing players when they don't have the money to do so. I would much rather they go down this route and find hidden talents. I mean, that's not to say that they won't be 8, 9, 10 million, as you said, but I don't want the club crippling themselves just so that they can go and sign a 15, 20 million pound player all for show. I'd much rather they keep this model going, which is really working. It's working really well over the past couple of years. If they can keep that going, plus bringing in maybe 2 or 3 more Navrowski sort of signings, or maybe another one that's a couple of £1 million more, in the sort of mould of Livakovic for 8, 9 million, then I'd be pretty happy. Because as much as the 15, 20 million pound players, they're good to look at and it's pleasing on the eye and it'll get you the headlines. they don't always work out. It's not a guarantee that these players will come in and automatically do well. So there's no point in taking that risk if there is doubt in whether or not that player can actually make the grade. Yeah, I'm fine with the way the model is just now. It sounds pretty clear from interviews that Brendan Rodgers is happy with that model as well. So I don't think there's any problems on that regard, and I'm quite happy to see that continue going forward.
I think at the moment, a lot of people are kind of just thinking about the players that can actually fill the positions rather than maybe worrying about what the transfer fee will be for those sort of individuals. Obviously, we do know Celtic have a lot of money in the bank. It's no secret at this stage, even before Jota was sold, there was plenty of available cash there. So we would like to see them kind of go out and push the boat out a bit, where that would be maybe equaling the transfer fee. So even though we're maybe sort of accepting there's not going to be somebody that's well over the transfer fee, or somebody that you're buying for a similar fee that you're maybe selling certain players for, you would still hope that there'll be a good bit of investment between now and the end of the window for the reasons that we've already touched on over the summer. You want to try and be competitive in the Champions League. Exactly what that looks like, it's going to be hard to tell. It's maybe something we'll come on to discuss when we look at your predictions in a wee bit today, Ryan, in terms of the European prospects. But yeah, it's also one we'll just need to keep an eye on. But he did touch on Rodgers that he's confident of bringing more players in, which hopefully will kind of settle a lot of people down, maybe myself included, because I probably have been kind of banging on a bit about not a lack of players, because I know Celtic have brought in 5, I think it is, which I suppose on its own is quite a lot, given that not a lot of players have left the club. I think it's 4 in total, if you include Jota, Barkas, Hazard and Urigidi, I believe. So there's
Shaw too.
Shaw as well.
I mean, he's went out on loan, but
yeah, you're right. 5 in total, one of them being on loan. So there's not been a lot of outgoings. I think we don't need to go into them too much, but hopefully, we will see a resolution with Barkas, Ayeti, James McCarthy, etc. between now and the end of the window. But it'll definitely be one to keep an eye on, Ryan. But I suppose it's maybe worth just going into your predictions then. So obviously this went live on the website today as a premium piece. You get access to it as part of your subscription to the website. And there's going to be one coming from each of the Celtic Way writers, kind of between now and the end of the week. One from myself, one from Alan Morrison, Kevin McKenna, and obviously Ryan, whose piece went live on the site today. So Ryan and I were obviously debating the kind of questions to ask in terms of, what we wanted to predict. So you obviously had obvious ones like young player of the season, top goal scorer, player of the season, most improved, etc. We also decided to chuck in a few more questions as well. In total, I believe it was about 9. So we'll just kind of go through it one by one. I guess the first one and most obvious one, Ryan, was player of the season. Now you have nominated Rio Hatate for this. I don't know if you want to kind of just show your thinking behind your working for that one.
I could go on all day talking about Rio Hatate. To be honest, he's undoubtedly my favourite player in this current Celtic team. I think he's absolutely magic. 25 years old. This is we were talking about this yesterday when we were both in the office, when we were saying that he's a very young 25 years old as well, due to coming through the university system in Japan. I think he's not got a lot of miles in his legs. With regard to his career, this is what his 3rd full season, you would say, in professional football. I just think that there's plenty more to come from him if he stays at the club. There's a big if. You're just hoping that Celtic don't cash in on him. For me personally, I worry if Brighton sell Moises Caicedo for that 80-90 million pound mark that they're talking about, and then they're looking for midfielders, and they'll put 2 and 2 together and get Mitoma's best mate in. Hopefully that's not the case. Rio Hatate stays for another season. I think it'll only be another season because he's that good. Next season, I think he will move on to maybe a better league. Not saying a better team, but a better league in the process. I just think that this is the breakout season for Hatate. We've seen it in glimpses in the past couple of seasons, maybe over a stretch of 45 games. But I think you'll see it consistently this season. I've said in the piece that he runs games single-handedly in the midfield. I think he dictates play. He's a goal threat. He's a good passer of the ball. Yes, all of his passes don't work out all of the time, but he takes risks in trying to make the good passes, and more often than not, they do pay off one way or another in a game. I just think he's an absolute joy to watch. I think he's the best midfielder in Scotland, maybe out with Callum McGregor, and I can't wait to see more of him next season. He's a player that really excites me, and I really enjoy watching him.
Yeah, he's absolutely phenomenal, Ryan. It feels like you run out of good things to say about Rio Hatate. I'm sure when you were writing that yesterday, you were thinking, how much of this have I said before in terms of praising his attributes? Because,
Copy and
yeah,
paste.
he very rarely kind of drops below maybe like a 7 or 8. He's probably developed into one of those guys. And I think it would have probably been, maybe not sure-in, but a very strong contender for Player of the Year last season if it wasn't for maybe the World Cup break, firstly disrupting a bit of momentum for a lot of players that probably fell into that sort of trap. Haksabanovic maybe being the same. Not that Haksabanovic could have been Player of the Year, but just that he's probably best run of form was coming up to the World Cup break. And then also Hatate also got a wee knock as well, didn't he? Which maybe he still played, I think it was 45 games last season, but maybe prevented him from kind of getting as much of a sort of shout towards it as like a Carter Vickers or a Callum McGregor, etc. But yeah, I think this could be a massive season for Hatate, and fingers crossed Celtic can keep him. At the moment, the sort of transfer speculation does seem to have died down, but I'm well aware that as we get into the final month for the window, particularly that last weekend and deadline day, you'd imagine it's going to be even more extreme this year with Saudi Arabian teams being able to just throw last minute money at clubs. And I know that he's a kind of agent did say that he wants to stay in Europe. Well, that necessarily means he'd be staying at Celtic. I don't know, but fingers crossed because he's a phenomenal player, Ryan, and a very worthy choice for your player of the season. The next one we've did was young player of the season, which I thought your answer was quite interesting. You went for Odin Thiago Home.
Yeah, just a 20-year-old that's just came into Scotland basically from Vålerenga. I think it's just I've not seen too much from him in terms of pre-season yet. I think he's been a wee bit passive in some of his play in some of the games where he's came on. He's maybe not had because he's not had a start. He'll be just looking to sort of break his way into the first team. But from just watching his clips on YouTube, from watching his highlight reels, I know we talk about it every day. YouTube can make any player look good, but he just looks like a really exciting young player in the same sort of mould as Martin Odegaard. I know the two of them are getting sort of at that same age, the two of them are getting touted for big things. It's not really worked out as well for Home because of injuries that have sort of curtailed his career in the past couple of years, but it looks as if he's shaking them off. I'm thinking if he comes into the side and can stake a claim in that midfield, maybe at the expense of a player. I don't know who he would be replacing in that midfield at the moment, but if he was to come in and make a good impact, then yeah, I'd love to see him as player of the season. It looks like he's a goal threat. He's quite a big guy. He can motor about the pitch. He's quite technical on the ball. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I just wanted, to be honest, I just wanted to go for a different name as well because I don't really see it at the moment. Obviously, we heard the news yesterday that Rocco Vata is with a new agent. So if you put two and two together, you maybe worry about him leaving the club to go and get more game time, either that or a loan deal. Ben Summers, it's a really congested midfield for where he's looking to operate. Bosun Lawal, there's loads of centre halves just now without even thinking about players that are going out on loan or leaving the club permanently in this window. So I just thought with the fact that Celtic paid 2 million, what was it, 2 million odd euros to secure Thiago Home's services, then I think maybe there's more of an emphasis to put him in the starting lineup more often than not, especially because you've signed him for money rather than just bringing him through the youth team. So I'm looking forward to seeing him next season. Hopefully, he can break into the first team. If not this season, then definitely next season. But if he makes enough of an impact this season, then it'll stand him in good stead for the season coming after that.
Absolutely. I mean, he's an exciting player with a very exciting profile. I think what probably interested a lot of fans was the fact that I believe he turned down the chance to go and join Juventus' academy when he was 16 so that he could stay and play first team football in the Norwegian League. So as much as he has had injuries, he's turning 20, having played, I think, well over 100 professional games, which is a real positive because you know what it can be like with some players are hitting maybe 22, 23 and they've not played that amount. So yeah, given that he has had kind of a couple of major injuries, the fact that he still played a lot of football is a positive to me. Hopefully, yeah, he's going to be somebody that can kind of come in and make a real impact for the side, even though he has 20s, very highly rated from all the scouting reports we've had. I know you also spoke to a Norwegian football expert at the time, Ryan, who was very sort of complimentary of Home, and he seemed to think he would have a chance of sort of going to the next level. And fingers crossed Celtic will allow him to be able to do that at the club and give him the platform as well to sort of improve his game. The next prediction after that is probably, as we're getting the sort of most obvious ones out of the way, a top goal scorer. Probably no surprise anybody that's listening to this that you've gone for Kyogo Furuhashi, obviously top goal scorer last season, 34 goals, I think it was in all competitions, 54 goals in total, he's 2 seasons at the club so far. We probably don't need to go into this one too much, Ryan, but I take it there wasn't really anybody else you could choose for this.
Choosing the best striker in Scotland as things stand. He's the main man at Celtic. I've called him the best since Larsson in my piece. So that'll be quite interesting to hear what other people have to say about that. I just think his movement is incredible. The goals that he scores are just so reminiscent of some of the goals that Henrik Larsson scored. I think he's such a talent. He's in the prime of his career, 28 years old, 4-year deal. He's settled. He's happy in this country and the team he plays for. And it's clear that Brendan Rodgers really rates him as a player as well. He wouldn't have given him a 4-year deal if not. He would have maybe tried to bring in his own striker. I don't know if he would have brought in maybe a Jamie Vardy or somebody like that, or somebody he knew from beforehand. But he's kept Kyogo at the club. It's very clear that he's going to be the number one striker. You've seen that now. I know he needs that operation soon, which may open the door for another player to get top goal scorer. Depends on when he has that operation. But yeah, I think if all goes to plan, Kyogo will continue to score goals. I think he'll be looking at that. Even though he's at 54 goals just now in all competitions, he'll be looking at 100 mark before he turns 30, I would believe. So he'll be working towards that, and in order to do that, he needs to score loads of goals this season. So I'd expect that to be the case for him. Such a great player, such a great signing. He looks like it was a complete snip to get him at 4.55 million from Japan. Postecoglou knew he was bringing in a player. That's why he was so desperate to get him through the isolation period. Took him a couple of games to get started. Remember, he made his debut against Jablonec, and then that game against. Oh no, he made his debut against Hearts. I'm trying to airbrush that game from my memory, but he made his striking debut against Jablonec, scored, and then scored a hat-trick in the next game. Yeah, what a player. Just a great presence, obviously, both on and off the pitch, and I'm looking forward to seeing him doing more next season.
Yeah, I mean, what can we say about Kyogo at this point? He's been a phenomenal signing. Maybe was a wee bit of speculation when the season was ending, even if Ange had stayed, what Kyogo's future was going to be. But the fact he signed that deal, in my opinion, that's still the most important bit of business Celtic have done this summer, getting Kyogo signed up in that contract extension, Ryan. I think it was phenomenal, and it did show intent from the club. We have kind of commented at times we want them maybe be a wee bit more ambitious in the window, but that was clear ambition, getting Kyogo signed up on that deal. He's such an important player, a talisman, I guess you could even say. And the fact that he had that deal kind of signed was a real positive. Just a couple of comments about Kyogo top goal scorer. David Ferguson comes in and says he's going for Maeda top goal scorer. You know, that it may not be out of the realms of possibility if he continues to feature as a number 9, Ryan. I think it will be interesting. We obviously have discussed throughout pre-season that Brendan Rodgers seemed to be, whether it was due to Kyogo's injury, I'm not entirely sure, but he did seem to be interested in playing Maeda as a number 9, and that could be something that continues across the season. There's different games that he thinks that suits more, but I'd imagine even if Maeda's maybe not top goal scorer, if he continues getting in the positions he has during pre-season, he'll be right up there anyway.
Yeah, I think he only scored, 10, 11 goals last season. He had a very stop-start season. Remember, a lot of people were really criticising him, especially after that Shakhtar Donetsk game at home. He was really struggling at that point, but it seemed as if for some players the World Cup didn't help them in terms of the progression, but it was the complete opposite for Maeda. He really took that in his stride. The fact he was leading the line a lot of the time for Japan in the World Cup, I think he came back with that renewed sense of confidence and belief that he could be one of the main men at Celtic, and he put in a lot of good performances in the second half of the season. I think one of the biggest ones being that cross to Jota in Hampden. Just, I don't know where he plucked that from, but it came out of nowhere, and it was absolutely brilliant to see. Yeah, I think he will score more goals than he did last season. It'll be interesting to see where Brendan Rodgers deploys him, as you said. I think there'll be games in which his presence up front may be required more so than Kyogo because of the pressing that he gives. He forces defenders into making mistakes, and I think it will just be a game-by-game basis on whether or not you need that pressing. Maybe in more difficult away games, maybe. I'm not to say that he'll start at Ibrox, but that would maybe be a game that would be suited for him to sort of question Rangers as centre halves and see if they make a mistake with their pressing. Maybe against Hearts as well. I'm not so sure. Maybe more physical games when you want to protect Kyogo. You know that teams are going to It's just common knowledge. At the end of the day, the fact that Kyogo has an injured shoulder means that he will be a sort of target for these teams. He will face challenges and the physicality. Not that he wouldn't face that anyway in Scotland, more so because they know that that's maybe a position of weakness for him. So that might be why Maeda can come in at the team and do that business, because you know that he doesn't mind getting involved in the physicality and stuff. He just gets back up. He doesn't complain about a thing. I think the only complaints we've seen from him last season was that lashing out against Hibs, which got him sent off, which feels like it was about 5 years ago now. But it's weird to remember that he did get sent off in a game. But yeah, I think it is a big season for Maeda. You know, he's also got a new 4-year deal, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Brendan Rodgers can do with him, because there's still plenty more to improve on. I think he's in the prime of his career at the age that he is, and I think Rodgers can take him on to the next level.
I think I've just kind of purged that Hibs game from my brain, Ryan, to be honest. But yeah, I did forget that Maeda got a red card. But yeah, outside of that, he was pretty disciplined across the season, to be fair. I think it could be even like a tactical tweak you maybe see in game sometimes if Kyogo is struggling, whether sort of Maeda's started a match or comes on in a sub, he then moves into the number 9 role. We know Rodgers is, as he's been described by Brendan Rodgers recently, by Cal McGregor, sorry, a master tactician. And I always think back to, and I know it is an obvious example that gets discussed a lot, but the 3-2 game back at Ibrox in 2018 when, you know, it was 2 each, you were down to 10 men, rather than sort of try to see it out. Brendan Rodgers brought on Edward, he came on, also scored a brilliant goal. And it does feel that maybe Maeda coming off the bench potentially, or if he's already starting as a winger coming inside, could be a tactical tweak we could see from Brendan Rodgers in games where maybe it's not working for Kyogo and he doesn't think that O's suited to come on. But the fact that we're discussing all these possible players as guys that can play through the middle is a positive, and it shows you that as much as we know some positions the club do need to fill for strength and depth, and look, there's arguments to be made that maybe another striker would still be good with the Asian Cup coming up in January. If we're taking the assumption that Maeda, Kyogo, they've all been in their national teams recently, they probably will be called up for that tournament. Maybe it would be good to get another striker in, but there is kind of depth there, and that's a real positive for me. I guess if we can just move on to the next one, Ryan, it's most assists. Now you've went for Matt O'Reilly. He got the most assists last season, as you've put here. You've 14 in all competitions. I guess that was maybe a bit like Kyogo, kind of a simpler one to select in terms of a prediction.
Yeah, 14 assists in all competitions last season. It makes you think that, you know, and maybe a bit of a mixed bag of a season. I know he was playing out of position for a large chunk of that in the number 6 role due to Cal McGregor's absence. But to get 14 assists for a season that you're up and down and changing position every second week or every sort of 2-3 months, then one can only wonder how much Brendan Rodgers can get out of Matt O'Reilly this season. He's got all the attributes to become a real success story under Brendan Rodgers. He's still, 21 years old, 21, 22, around about that age. I just think there's so much more to come from Matt O'Reilly. I think he's been, again, like Odin Thiago Homey, has been a wee bit quiet in pre-season. He has had a couple of okay performances, but not any standout as of yet. He's had a couple of good wee balls that I think one went to Kyogo, and Kyogo was unlucky not to score it. It was either Kyogo or Maeda, but it just shows that he's getting back into shape, back into the swing of things, and preparing himself for another big season ahead of him. I mentioned in the article that Brendan Rodgers, specifically in the number 10 role, knows how to get the best out of players playing in that role, such as Felipe Coutinho, James Maddison and Tom Rogic. Could even add Stuart Armstrong into that mix, even though he was a hybrid of kind of like an 8 or a 10. I know you can't really say a number 9 because that sounds like a striker, but in between those two roles, that's where he played. So it seems as if Brendan Rodgers' favoured position in terms of getting the most out of players seems to be attacking midfielder and in the wing positions. You're just hoping with players like Matt O'Reilly, I know we'll talk about Abada in a wee bit as well, but with Matt O'Reilly, I think he could get loads of assists next season. His plan will be to finish with more than 14. If he can even get less than 14, but maybe up the goal tally, if he was to maybe get like 10 assists and then 10 goals, then that would be double digits for both, and it would be a really good season statistically. It felt like ages last season when we were waiting for Matt O'Reilly to score, and then I think he got 2 in the one game, or he got 2 in 2 weeks. He got one against St Mirren and one against Kilmarnock as well. I know those 2 games were quite close to each other, and he was doing himself justice in terms of his goal tally, because he should be a goal threat. He's got a good shot at the ball when he isn't trying to finesse it into the back of the net. You're just wondering if he puts his laces through it every once in a while, then he'd score more goals. But I think he's trying to score the perfect goal a lot of the time. But yeah, on to assists. If Matt O'Reilly can still get the most assists in the league for any player and for Celtic, then he'll be doing quite well. But I'd like to see more progression in his game, more of an overall sort of improvement, and I think that Brendan Rodgers could bring that out of him.
I definitely think if he gets a sort of whole campaign of playing further forward, I would expect his numbers to increase both in goals and assists, Ryan. I think you're right in what you're saying in terms of he maybe does sometimes try to score the perfect goal, but he did show near the end of the campaign that he can find the back of the net, and I'm sure that's something himself that he's discussed at times. I remember in press conferences he's talked about wanting to kind of be a bit more lethal and kind of add to his goal tally, because he's already kind of there with assists. He's the most creative player on the team in terms of sort of opening up goal scoring opportunities. So you'd imagine his goals and assists will increase if he's one of the main players and he's constantly playing in that sort of number 10, number 8 role, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think that's another solid choice and probably one that most people would agree with. The next one we went for was, who do you think will be the signing of the season? And you went for Mike Nawrocki. Do you want to just talk us through that?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of an asterisk with this one, because obviously the transfer window isn't closed yet. You'd be hoping that Mike Nawrocki would be a good signing, but there is better still to come. But just going on the players that we had in front of us in order to select, I'll go for Nawrocki, because at 22 years old, I'm talking about how he gives the club another option at the back. He allows the club to maybe play with 3 at the back if Starfelt and Carter Vickers are both fit. He's played in a 3-5-2 before at Legia Warsaw, which is quite exciting. I know John Kennedy yesterday said that they'll be mixing it up a bit, playing a few formations throughout the course of the season. That's exactly, as a Celtic supporter and as somebody that writes about Celtic, that's what you want to hear. You want to be kept on your toes with regard to what formation Celtic are playing. It's as much as it's good to know that Celtic were playing a 4-3-3 most weeks, it is good to keep you guessing, and it even makes the predicted lineups quite interesting as well, because you don't know exactly how the team are going to line up every week, and it makes your job a wee bit easier in terms of writing different stuff instead of saying the same stuff every week, which is always good. Yeah, Mike Nawrocki, £4 million. You would expect a guy that cost £4 million not to be sitting on the bench all too often for Celtic. I think he's one of these guys that once he's in the starting lineup, it'll be very difficult to take him out of that. It'll be interesting to see if he gets his debut tonight. It looks as if it's all setting up for that. He's been in training along with the rest of the centre halves. I think that photo yesterday of all the centre halves in training was a really welcome sight. Seeing Carter Vickers, Starfelt, Ralston at right back, and Nawrocki all training. That's a very welcome sight ahead of the start of the season, because we were looking a wee bit bare bones in the defensive positions. So it's good that we're getting players that are used to those positions and play those positions for most of the time coming back into the team. Yeah, going back to Nawrocki, I think it'll be a very exciting signing. You're just hoping he hits the ground running. From the clips that we've watched of him and the fact that he played against Brendan Rodgers before for Legia Warsaw against Leicester, he's very highly rated. He looks as if a player that fits the model perfectly when you spend a wee bit more for him, but you might get a better player through the door, but one that can hit the ground running straight away. Looks a goal threat, looks like he can pass the ball, looks like he's good with those cross balls as well, chipping the ball to the striker. I think those chip balls especially are going to be Maeda's dream if he can run onto them just over the defender, and that sort of Harvey Barnes role. If he could run, I know Harvey Barnes obviously played for Newcastle just now, but he played for Leicester. If Maeda can get on the ball the same as he did, then he'll be a constant goal threat, especially from those long balls. So yeah, Mike Nawrocki, best signing, but I would also put an asterisk there. So far, you're hoping that Celtic can go out and get a better signing before the transfer window shuts. But as it stands, Mike Nawrocki for the best signing.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, Ryan, and you're right to point out that there's still a month left in the transfer window. Hopefully the club will be doing plenty more business, and maybe that's a prediction we could potentially revisit during the international break, even after the Rangers game, after your first sort of 5 fixtures and the window's closed. But yeah, I think it's a fair shout based off what we had in front of us when we were writing these. And yeah, I think fans are excited to see what Nawrocki can do. Comes with a price tag, and hopefully he'll actually make his debut tonight, which would be quite good to see. Get some minutes under his belt, and then he would imagine he'll then be a favourite to start against Ross County on Saturday, if that's the case. Moving on to the next one, Ryan, most improved player. You have gone for Leo Abada for that one.
Yeah, and let me just caveat this one before I get people in the comments shouting at me saying he doesn't need to improve. He's already a good player. I just think he can improve even more under Brendan Rodgers. And I think everybody's been saying that. I think everybody's been saying that over pre-season. And there is no doubt that Leo Abada, and I do make this point in the article, Leo Abada is a very, very good football player. He's good at scoring goals. He's got that killer touch. He's always a goal threat in and around the goal. He knows where danger is, and he thrives upon that, and he gets into dangerous positions. But I think with Brendan Rodgers and the fact that he knows how to work with wingers, seen it in the past, he's probably the reason why Scott Sinclair had such a good career out with Celtic, with Swansea, etc. Because of Brendan Rodgers' impact. I think that Leo Abada, if he can improve on his wing play, his crossing, and sometimes his decision making, which already does look better in the pre-season games that we've watched so far. His decision making does look good. He's trying to look for that pass rather than maybe going for a silly shot or continuing to dribble with the ball and then get dispossessed. I think there is so much more to come from Leo Abada. I'm delighted that he's staying. I'd resigned myself to the fact that he was leaving the club due to the Ajax links and the Fenerbahce links too. For the money that was getting quoted, there is just no point in selling a player for 10 million when you could maybe get double or treble that if he has a good season this season, maybe signs an extension for a couple of years. Hopefully that is the case, and he does sign a couple of years just so that Celtic maximise their profits when it does come to selling him. Not that I'm wishing him away, but the fact that he's 21 years old, it's just inevitable that his peak years won't be at Celtic. So if the model is to continue to work, then Celtic have got to sell these players in the process. I just think that if he can improve on the things that Brendan Rodgers knows that he can improve wingers with, then I think he'll be a hell of a player next season and a bit of a weapon in Europe and domestically too. I'm looking forward to seeing how well he does improve under Brendan Rodgers, as I am for a lot of players. I think he can improve so many players in this team. I think Leo Abada, he's a bit of a rough diamond, but I think Brendan Rodgers can mould him into a perfect diamond with his man management.
But we know how good Rodgers is at developing young players. It's kind of something we've discussed a lot, but Kieran Tierney, Stuart Armstrong, the list goes on, Tom Roderick as well in his first spell. And I think you can see Abada's fitting into that already. I know it's still early days, but I've been really impressed with him in pre-season so far, because other players that have done really well, Hatate, Kyogo, McGregor, Maeda, were already kind of important parts of the squad, whereas Abada was at times last season a wee bit of a bit part player, despite his numbers still being good, as you point out. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see him, and I think he was a really interesting choice for your most improved player. One of the commenters, Sam Harty, comes in agreeing with you, saying Rodgers already getting more from Abada, and yeah, it's clear to see that as the case, and that's a real positive, because we know that was one of the best attributes of Brendan Rodgers during his first spell, developing young players, and long may that continue, Ryan. I guess if we'll just move into the next one, this is when we started to do a couple of kind of extra predictions outside of your typical type of award nominations. Next one we've went for is how will Celtic do in Europe? Now, you have said minimum third place, but that would be dependent on the Champions League group if it was more favourable. So not a group of kind of death scenario. You'd be hoping the club would be challenging for second.
Yeah, it's all eyes will be on that group stage draw at the end of August, I believe. These groups, Celtic will hardly ever get an easy group. You can't get an easy group in the Champions League. This is why Celtic want to be in this competition, because they're going to truly test themselves against Europe's elite. But you're never going to get an easy group. But you can maybe get a more favourable group where Celtic's aspirations could maybe change. For me, I wrote in this segment that third is the bare minimum this season. If Celtic want to be serious and they want to talk about how they want to improve in Europe, then Europe after Christmas is the bare minimum. You're just hoping that the pot 3 team, because Celtic will be in pot 4, you're hoping that the pot 3 team is near abouts the same level as Celtic, maybe even just a tiny bit better, but one in which Celtic could get the better of them in a couple of games. Ideally, you're looking for 4 points against that third place team. if the pot 1 and pot 2 sides are favourable, then obviously expectations and ambitions can change, and Celtic could maybe go for second place into the Champions League knockout stages. Of course, after this season, there will be no drop down into the third place into the Europa League, so this is the last chance for Celtic to maybe go on a Europa League run in that sort. So it will be interesting to see what the draw will be like. If Celtic get a good draw, then second place I think is well within our reach. But if it's a difficult draw, say for example you were to get like a Man City and then Tottenham in pot 1 and pot 2, not Tottenham. Did I say Tottenham? I mean, I said Dortmund, didn't I?
I thought you said Tottenham there, to be honest.
I
I
don't know. That's so weird. I obviously still get Postecoglou in the brain. If you were to get maybe Manchester City in pot 1 and Borussia Dortmund in the second one, then you'd be like, maybe third place is a better place. And third place, bare minimum, but second place if it's achievable. I don't want Celtic finishing fourth and then just finishing it after and having no European football after Christmas. That's a nightmare scenario. And, these games take care of themselves. They're the games that you look forward to every season and you want them to continue after Christmas. Look, at the end of the day, I just want Celtic to win a knockout tie. It'd be absolutely brilliant. I've never seen it before in my Celtic supporting life. I'd love that duck to be broken, and yeah, that's what I'm wanting.
I think a lot of people would probably agree with you there, Ryan, and yeah, I think it's important that Celtic do try and impose themselves in Europe. Exactly what form that will take, I'm unsure. And a bit like the sort of signing of the season, this is probably a bit harder to predict until you've got all the relevant information, in this case the draw for the Champions League. But I think given that the next season is going to be when the format's changing with UEFA, there's going to be even more games, obviously. I think it'll be 8 games, sort of different teams you'll be playing. Like, it won't be like the normal group stage format. So I think ahead of that, Celtic want to be able to demonstrate that they can do something in Europe. But exactly what that will entail, we'll obviously have to just kind of keep an eye on that and see how it gets on near the time. The next one, Ryan, we can probably sail through that quite quickly because we've already kind of discussed it in the intro today. But what still needs to be done in the transfer market for Celtic? You've said a goalkeeper, a left winger, obviously to replace Jota, and a left back.
Yeah, I think all of those three are quite important. Maybe, I think depending on Alistair Johnson's injury as well and how quickly he gets back, potentially a right back could be recruited, although Tomoki Iwata is kind of silenced those doubts with some really good performances in pre-season. I know the two Japanese teams, you can't really say too much, but he really did put in a good performance versus Wolves as well. So he solidified his place in terms of the manager's thinking, where he won't be a first pick at right back. That's just not the case. Alistair Johnson will be first choice right back when he returns. But he's shown that he has a very reliable backup when called upon. And I've got no doubt that he could probably do that on the other side as well, at left back and in the centre of defence and in defensive midfield. So all of a sudden, you've got a guy that can play 2 or 3 different positions. That's going to be great for Celtic, especially if injuries pile up over the course of the season. You know that a guy, except if he gets injured, obviously, that's not to say he'll be untouchable and he won't get injured, but if he is fit and available, then he can slot in all these positions. So right back would maybe be less of a concern now than what it was a couple of weeks ago, and that's all due to the credit, and that's all down to Tomoki Iwata's performances. Goalkeeper, yeah, we talk about it every day. I think Celtic need a long-term replacement for Joe Hart in goals. It's not slating him. I just think there's a slight decline in his game that's becoming more and more apparent game by game. If Celtic are interested in Dominic Livakovic, get the checkbook out. Why is he not at Fenerbahce yet? That's a question for me. Is it because of the qualifiers, or is it because something's not getting ironed out? Or is it because Celtic have came in and hijacked the deal, as was getting rumoured a couple of days ago? If that's the case, then I think that should be Celtic's. I would actually go as far to say that should be Celtic's record signing. If that was the case, I'd break that record. I'd bring him in for 10 million and you would see the difference instantly. A goalkeeper that's good with the ball at his feet, that keeps the ball at the back of the net, he's got international experience. That wouldn't hurt him. It wouldn't hurt his international prospects because he'd still be number one. I would say that Celtic are a far better team than Zagreb. I know they've got really good youngsters every season that seem to go on for a big profit. But I'd say Celtic overall are a better team than Zagreb. So yeah, if you could get that done, that'd be absolutely brilliant. And then left wing, You need to replace Jota. I don't think it's going to wash having Dyson Maeda as the replacement for Jota in that position. I think that his goals and assists are so difficult to replace, but Celtic have got to get the chequebook out in that regard and bring in somebody that's maybe £6-7 million worth that is going to do that in Europe. Because I've always said this, I've said this in every podcast that I've been on, you speculate to accumulate with these players, you spend more on a guy that's going to get you goals and assists, then you will sell him on for more. That's just how football works. Celtic take the risk, signing a player for 6-7, even if they want to break their transfer record in that position instead of Lovakovic, then that would be fine, as long as they bring in capable replacements for both positions that we've talked about. Yeah, I think a left wing would be the preferential in terms of those three positions, I would say, just in terms of the goals that we need replaced and the assists that Jota brought the team. Jota's a big miss, but he is replaceable, and I think Celtic should be like, they should have scouted who's replacing him by now, and now they're getting into the point where they're talking about deals and they're talking about the financials that are involved with getting his replacement through the door. I noticed that. I know that West Ham were interested in him for £13 million, but I don't think that Carlos Borges is even signed for them yet. That could be an avenue that Celtic maybe go back to, because I read yesterday that West Ham are the only Premier League side that haven't made a signing this summer as of yet. So if he's maybe still available, then you could maybe look to him. I don't know what sort of fee you'd be. Obviously, you're talking about the 13 million. Maybe if you can get that down a wee bit, then that would be ideal. But yeah, a left winger is definitely needed to replace Jota.
I think people would probably agree with all of them, Ryan. And I know you didn't include right back in your predictions, but you touched on it. Yeah, if Alistair Jones is going to be out for a prolonged period, at the moment it's 3 months. But I think even if we get kind of more confirmation that that is the case, then you could see a sort of swoop made for a right back, as well as hopefully those three positions. If we move on to the last one, Ryan, the kind of question we posed for the final prediction was, what will Celtic win? Now, you have said the league and the cup, because you could argue it's worth sacrificing one of the cups for an extended run in Christmas through the group stages, through the knockout stages, sorry. Do you want to just kind of maybe get a wee bit more detail behind your thinking from that?
Yeah, this isn't to say that Celtic won't win a treble. I'd really like Celtic to win another treble. You know, as a Celtic fan, we're getting quite used to winning them. Over the last 7 years, it's been an absolutely incredible run of unprecedented success domestically. I just think that it's a very, very tough ask to win trebles every season. I think a double would be absolutely brilliant if you could sacrifice that if you could sacrifice maybe the League Cup, because I said the Scottish Cup and the Scottish Premiership. I just think it's going to be a congested fixture list, and if Celtic can put, it's not to say that Celtic won't concentrate on every competition that they go in. I'm sure they will as games pile up. But I just think if Celtic were to sacrifice a cup for a run in Europe, whether that be in the last 16 of the Champions League or further on in the Europa League, then I would have no issues with that whatsoever. I think Europe is where Brendan Rodgers is ultimately going to get. Europe is ultimately where Brendan Rodgers is going to get judged on his second stint here. He's won every competition before in Scotland. He's won 7 out of 7 trophies. As much as it'll be nice to get more trophies in terms of domestic cups, the bread and butter is the league for what that does financially in terms of getting into the Champions League. As long as Celtic get that sorted, then I don't mind them sort of bypassing any cups. For me, a good European Cup run would be just as good as a domestic cup.
Yeah, I think that's probably maybe not as unpopular as some people might think, in terms of a feeling amongst fans that you would like to see improvement in Europe if that meant sacrificing potentially a cup. Obviously, ideally you do both, and you'd imagine Brendan Rodgers and the squad will be trying to do both. But yeah, it's definitely one that it'll be interesting to see how it transpires. I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on the Champions League draw, isn't it, Ryan? And I know you touched on that when you were talking about the position you were discussing Celtic might finish in the group. So maybe that's another one we can sort of revisit along with a couple of them when we get more of a sort of fuller picture come the end of the transfer window. And maybe even our national break might be a good time to do that. if there's anything we want to sort of adjust, etc., just by then we'll have more of a clear picture. But I think we'll leave it there for today, guys. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for your comments. Once again, if you're interested, tick or tape down below and in the description of this podcast. Subscribe to the Celtic Way website, support top quality journalism, covering the club you all love. The current deal we're offering, £12 for a year's access to the website. That's ad-like coverage, and as part of that, you'll get features, scouting report, data analysis, opinion, match reaction from myself, Ryan and Tony. Tonight, Ryan and I will be providing an instant analysis from James Forrest's testimonial, and tomorrow at some point live on the site, Ryan will have his big match verdict as well. So get yourself involved in that, guys, if you're interested. We really appreciate it. It allows us to do kind of videos like this Monday to Friday and then match reaction at the weekend, which is going to be a regular feature across the season. So once again, if that interests you, www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us, mate.
Thanks for having me, mate. It was a good chat.
You and I will be back tomorrow.